to really kick us off and give us a starting point. I'm going to pass to Meredith first. So Meredith, new research shows that light pollution is increasing in the United States at an annual rate of 9.6%. Most of us can even hardly see the stars, as you put that gradient up for us. Why should we care about the night sky?
Yeah, it's that's kind of a shocking figure that the night sky, the amount of light pollution is increasing 9.6% annually in the United States. And so we can imagine the exponential growth. Where are we going with that? Where will it stop? That's a study that just came out in 2023. But what we have to remember, as Craig was telling us in the introduction, is that the night is not just a time period. You know, we think about this, the diurnal aspect of the night, the rotations of the cycle of light and darkness. The night is also a place and a habitat for so many different living things. We have birds migrating at nighttime. It's amazing that while we're asleep, actually billions of birds that they spend their winters down in South America and the Caribbean, and they fly, you know, these vast distances, thousands of miles, up to the boreal forests of Canada and upper United States. And they do that all at nighttime. And the reasons why they migrate at night are really because, well, temperatures are lower, so they're exerting a lot of energy flying across the sky. Also, their predators tend to migrate during the day, like hawks and different kinds of raptors. And there's also fewer airflows that they can get caught in, lesser weather events. So while we're asleep at night, actually the night is alive with life. All different kinds of creatures and insect populations, and there's the whole web of the food network. The food web is unfolding. But can you press that? This is what we have instead. And this is an image that we saw earlier from Craig. This is a light pollution map in the United States. This is actually quite a few years old. But you can see, if you take the avian flyway map and you map it onto this, all of the major corridors, there's 3 major corridors for bird migration. There's the Pacific Flyway, which we can't see the cities in California. This kind of chops off, but the Pacific Flyway, the Mississippi Flyway, and then we've got the Atlantic Flyway. All of our major cities, they're right along these river routes and stuff. They're flying right over, so they get distracted by the light. It's actually, I'll just say one last thing. It's remarkable that the birds use these different cues in the environment to navigate. They're using the moonlight, they're using the rising and setting sun, but studies also show that they are using the constellations and the stars when they were projecting them inside of space. And birds would reorient themselves to the projected stars. So these birds have skills and knowledge, let's say, and inborn, navigation that we don't really understand fully and can't even really appreciate. But we're losing these birds, and there's a worry that these birds might not be around. The beautiful song of the wood thrush, say 30 or 40 years from now. Can you go to the next slide? So I just want to highlight again that. Can you put that again? We have 722 bird species in North America. Of these, about 3/4 migrate. And does anyone recognize these 2 bird species? Any birders here? We've got the black-throated green and the black and white warbler. So these are the kinds of birds that migrate at nighttime. They're so tiny. They're this big, and they're flying these massive distances. Some of them are flying from, Venezuela, Colombia. They're flying all the way up here to Connecticut. We see them. And the least that we can do is give a safe journey for them. They're challenging, difficult times for them when they're in their transit. They're beautiful birds, and they're important to the ecosystem. These are insectivores. They're eating so many bugs when they arrive in spring. they are eating the bugs. So we need these guys as much as they're beautiful. We actually need them as part of a healthy ecosystem. I'll leave it at that. There's so much more to say.
Thank you for that start, Meredith. That's great. This next question is for you, Leo. And as Craig's slideshow showed us that light does not actually contribute to safety. I think it's been taught so much that it's almost considered, common sense that when you're out at night, you want to be in well-lit areas. So I'm really shocked, Leo. I need you to answer this question. So some people feel more secure at night by leaving an outdoor light on. Will leaving an outdoor light on all night actually help security? And if not, what is the best practice for improving security with outdoor lighting? I'm also going to get some steps.
Instinctively, we all think that if it's illuminated outside, it's safer. Actually, not only is that not the case, but it's actually the reverse. There are studies that have been done in Chicago, for example, where they decided that the alleyways were not illuminated enough, so they wanted to double the amount of light. And at the point where about half of the alleyways were double illuminated, one of the universities stepped in and did a research project on crime rates and what happened with the alleyways that were more dimly lit and ones that were more illuminated. The ones that had double the light had almost double the crime rate. Also, when you get into lighting, you also deal with glare. A lot of times when the light's out there, you're not able to see as well if that light is actually coming at you. And as we get older, our eye actually has a problem with light where the light scatters in our eye and we don't see as well. The best thing that we can do for security in terms of outdoor lighting and safety is to use motion activated lighting. The light's out, it's dark. If someone does come up onto the property and trips the light comes on, and all of a sudden, if we're dealing with a bad guy, that bad guy is going to turn around and go away because they don't know what happened. They don't know if someone saw them. It's no two ways about it. One, that saves the energy, but two, from a safety standpoint, that ability to startle with that turn on of the light that results from motion activation is by far the best we can do in the way of providing light and safety. Another issue with light and safety, we have, let's take street lights in a residential setting where maybe we have a street light every 200, 300 feet. Maybe we'll get into a little later about the fact that that's not really so good, but let's say that you have that quiet residential street, probably the sidewalk rolls up at 10 o'clock at night. There's no cars, there's no pedestrian traffic, there's nothing going on, but those lights stay on all night long. Now there are controls that could be implemented that would say, for example, at 10 o'clock at night, the power that lights these lights is going to be reduced by 75%. What does that do? It still leaves some light, but it doesn't leave 100% of the light, 25%. And maybe an hour before dusk or dawn, the light comes back on at full strength. So if you're dealing, let's say, this time of the year, 5 o'clock in the morning when people might be getting ready to go to work early or whatever, you have full illumination. But you don't need that from 10 at night until 5 in the morning. So those are just a couple examples of how security and lighting can go together.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Leo. So Meredith, you're next. So what would you say is our fascination? What's up with it? What's up with it? It's really an addiction to lighting, and to artificial lighting specifically.
Yeah, This kind of gets into more of the sticky cultural kind of associations that we have with light. I mean, we have a lot of, first of all, cultural ideas that light is associated with ideas. You know, you can see in cartoons when someone has an idea, a light bulb comes on. We associate light with knowledge. That's like kind of an ancient Greek idea. And also with religion, you know, the light of the world. You know, especially with Christianity and Judeo-Christian traditions. We have an association of light with goodness. And then, so if we have all these associations of light on that side, the darkness and the night becomes a place that's scary. It's, you know, has associations with evil, has associations with ignorance, you know, like left in the dark. Who's left in the dark on that? You don't know. So that has really rich, all sorts of different associations that we have with the night, that it's really become, you know, over time in our cultures, really undervalued and even a place of sight to put a lot of our fears. So that makes it all the more challenging when we talk about it, is that you have the rational explanations of, you know, more light doesn't necessarily make you safer, but we have all of these cultural resonances with light and dark that make it challenging for us to actually see the truth of it. So it's something to be aware of as you navigate these discussions, and including if your town decides to look at your lighting rules, is that we have a lot of cultural baggage, let's say, around it that needs to be looked at and considered. We have this fascination with light associated with productivity. You know, when you see New York City in the Times Square, that's the city that never sleeps. And that's the most illuminated place in the world, you know, besides Las Vegas and some places, Tokyo. The places that are the brightest are the places that never sleep, and that's not healthy. That's not a sustainable way. What human could go all around the clock? We just can't. We have to rest. There's a value in resting. You know, there's a value to having leisure time. So it's really like this idea around values and coming back to like, what is a healthy balance, and how do we appreciate that we need those cycles of light and dark? Dark has goodness as well. Dark has a place of rest. Darkness is a place of mystery. It's a place of wonder, and to really lean into those ideas that, you know, the night is really important and valuable in the human experience.
I really like that you put that together, not even thinking about how pervasive, you know, just the thoughts of what light versus dark is. And when you talked about it's not just a time, right? It's not just a time of day or of the, you know, solar cycle, but it's full of life, right? So even just thinking about it in that way is really putting it into perspective for me. So thank you, Meredith. That's really cool. So Craig, the panel has been talking about light pollution in our town and cities. Why does a land trust in Connecticut need to be concerned with light pollution? So the land trust can mitigate light pollution on their properties, on our 68 properties. Why do they need to be concerned with the greater town and region collectively?
Yeah, that's a big question. We're trying to bring this home to what you do as a land trust. I briefly touched upon these cycles that amphibians have. I'm sure you have in your vernal pools that are needed by spotted salamanders for their mating. A lot of these amphibians also rely on these cycles of when to know when to start singing in the spring, our chorus frogs, for example. Also our moths. You probably know that most of your trees are being pollinated by moths that live up in the canopy. I'm sure we have all read a lot of Doug Talamy and his emphasis on moths and flaming oaks. But so these animals are being impacted by the light. However, if you think you have like a nice dark area where things are okay, but you're in a sea of light around you from the city, what happens during migration is that the birds who have lost their way because they're disoriented by the surrounding light will come into your land trust properties. There's a study that shows that there is definitely an increase in this over controls. So you're going to have an inordinate amount of birds landing during migration in your properties. Have you landscape forms that make sure that there's plenty of insects and berries or whatever that they need? Also, are there your neighbors? Do they have glass that's facing your properties that are going to reflect the beautiful landscape that you have there, the shrubs and the grasses and all that? The birds see reflections and they smash into it. That's one of the main, the chief contributors to the bird collisions that we have. So yeah, you have to worry about what kind of light that there is on your properties if it's shining in. I looked up for your town, you do not have a light trespass law. That means people would be able to have security lights from their buildings, their backyards, and patios shining into your properties, which will disrupt the plants and the animals. So that's something you have to be concerned about, but also to the bigger extent of what's going to happen with these birds in particular that are going to use your land trust. Because I know your properties aren't just for humans.
Thank you so much for getting us started with that, Craig. Patty, we're going to come to you to expound a little bit and just give us some information on what are the challenges of minimizing light pollution specifically in Farmington. And what is the town doing to mitigate the effects of light pollution?
Thanks, Jess. So challenges in Farmington, there are capital costs if Farmington were to change out all of its lights, even if at the end of the day it could be less money to operate the lights, more efficient. There's capital costs associated with changing town fixtures. And the town went through a lighting project in 2017 to bring on around 2017, to bring the more efficient LED bulbs, which in fact did save the town money on its electric bill. But as Craig pointed out, very blue light, very bright bulbs. I've had people call me asking about the LED bulbs and why are they brighter and why is it now shining in my bedroom. So challenges are in our finance. There's challenges in terms of staff, people in town hall who can actually do work to change, to make change. And most of what we're tied up in right now is what ordinances do we currently have on our books in terms of what are private homeowners, businesses, what can we require them to do? And as Craig pointed out, we don't have a light trespass law, and that would require change into our ordinances, and that requires having a town council or town planning zoning to initiate a committee to review the process of changing the ordinances, and that takes time. And then just so everyone's on the same page, the town of Farmington sets a strategic plan every 2 years, and if it's not in that strategic plan, it's not showing up in the town's budget. So the strategic plan for the next 2 years was set 2 weeks ago. There is a Green Efforts Committee in town, and that's a very open goal. So the town's goal is to support green efforts. So the place to, that's some of what's happening is however that committee gets driven, but those are all volunteers. And then on the other side, we do have zoning laws in town that have been, as they get updated, as new districts get added, the zoning ordinances for particular districts do have lighting restrictions. For example, there's a New Britain Avenue development district, and that has lighting requirements that it has to be downcast. There's the Ridgeline district requires that the light cannot escape the property, and there's a few others that specifically call out that it has to be dark sky compatible lighting. So there are opportunities to change things gradually. So these new districts do have these lighting restrictions as new projects are approved in those districts, and a lot of these will be more multifamily housing, commercial spaces. The key is those are only a small portion of Farmington, and will need to have an impact over time, the entire town would in some way, shape, or form need to be changed.
Well, thank you for also that education on how town politics works also, Patty. And it sounds like that, just like everything else, it sounds like it's up to us to do our part individually until it's changed on a larger scale. The green effort sounds like it's the way to go at the moment, right? Leo, the Illuminating Engineering Society and Dark Sky International agreed to the 5 principles for outdoor lighting in 2019. Would you be able to walk us through these 5 principles? And I think there might be a graphic for it. Thank you.
Sure. Before I address that, just a point. You know, you talk about like light trespass rules at the municipal level. In 2004, the Connecticut State Building Code was amended with a light pollution control amendment that requires shielding for all commercial applications except for minor stuff. But the bottom line is that applies to every municipality. So if Stop and Shop comes into town and they want to build a Stop and Shop with a nice parking lot, every single one of those street lights, or this parking lot lights, has to be fully shielded in order to comply with the state building code. So that's sort of a way to go forward with regards to municipal regulation. Dark Sky has been around since 1988 when it was founded by a group of astronomers that were concerned about the loss of the night sky. The Illuminating Engineering Society has been around a lot longer. It's a professional group. It's composed of lighting professionals, lighting engineers, lighting manufacturers, and the 2 groups got together in 2019 and agreed to the 5 principles for outdoor lighting. The first is, as it shows on the slide, useful. What does that mean? Well, is there any use at all for that light? If there is, fine, that's checkpoint number 1. If there isn't, then don't consider it. Number 2 is targeted. When you have a light that shines on that pathway that you want to illuminate, that's wonderful. But does it really serve any purpose to illuminate those trees in the forest over there and part of the night sky when all you really want is shielding the light so that it goes where it's intended is the next one. Low level, what does that mean? Well, you could light like it's noontime in the daytime, or you could light to the level that you really need in order to be able to see. And it's kind of amazing when you think about what it's like if you have a full moon and it's dark and you can walk a path and you can see where that rock is and you know that you have to walk around it. If that full moon is in no clouds, you get to see all the light from the full moon. That's 0.02 foot candle. The minimum level for lighting a parking lot is recommended at 2 foot candle. That's 100 times more bright than a full moon. Do you really need 100 times? No. So the question is, how do you determine what that lighting level is that does what it's needed to do, provides for safety and security, but doesn't go over the top in terms of lighting much more than is ever needed? The next one is controlled, and the controls that are out there today are wonderful. You have controls that are timers that will allow you to turn that light off at 10 o'clock at night, or if you want, it could actually turn the light down 75% at 10 o'clock at night. So you can use that timer to regulate the amount of energy that you're using and to limit the amount that you're using in times when you really don't need the light. Another part of this in terms of controls that we talked about a little earlier is that motion activated lighting, where you can leave the light out and then the light comes on and someone trips that device. The final agreed to principle has to do with color. Why is color important? When LED headlights first made their way into the market, how many of us were driving down the road finding that there was this bluish headlight coming at us from the other direction, and our eyes were saying, that hurts, I don't like that. And what happened was LEDs were just put out there with no treatment. They were just put out there, and they had a lot of blue in them. The problem with blue wavelength light is that blue wavelength light has a shorter wavelength than, let's say, a red or yellow or orange. And what happens is that that shorter wavelength will go up into the air, hit an air particulate, and come back down as light pollution. The more blue you have, the more light pollution you have. So if we can eliminate the blue, that's a wonderful thing. And the industry has taken to the call to the point that 3,000 Kelvin is available now everywhere. And that's sort of on the warm white side. We have a lot of places that are 2,700 Kelvin, which is even a little better. But when you think about where we were at before LEDs, we had high pressure sodium street lights and out parking lot lights. High pressure sodium lights were at 2,200 Kelvin, way down there. They were sort of that orangey look. So we operated in a very safe environment, no problem, being able to work at 2,200 Kelvin. We really don't need 5,000 Kelvin or 4,000 Kelvin. 3,000 maximum should be considered in terms of setting municipal policy that would say that if you're going to do new outdoor lighting, we're not going to go after you if you already have it up. But if you haven't got it up, you have to use 3,000 Kelvin or less for your new project, or we don't approve it. So that's one consideration. But those are the 5 principles. They're very simple, easy to understand, easy to implement, not technical, but they're very important.
There's a handout.
Thank you so much for that. So Meredith, next question is for you. Last year, Connecticut passed Public Act number 23-143, which is Connecticut's Lights Out law, which requires all state-owned buildings in Connecticut to shut off unnecessary lights from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. year-round for birds. What are Connecticut's state-level rules limiting light pollution?
Okay, so we already have on the books, it's funny, if you look around, we see a lot of light in Connecticut, but we're actually, comparatively with other states, Connecticut has relatively decent laws, at least on the books. We have state building code rules, actually thanks to Leo. He was working on these back in 2004 when these were passed. These are light pollution controls requiring all exterior lighting to have, you see that language there, full cutoff luminaires? Let's see, yeah, full cutoff luminaires. That actually means fully shielded. That means that the light should be facing mostly downward, not horizontally or in other directions. And that's required, this is for all new construction and major retrofits at commercial buildings. So all new construction and major retrofits of commercial buildings, anywhere in the state, all the lighting, exterior lighting should be down shielded with a bunch of exceptions. The problem is that there's quite a few exceptions, and one of the projects that we're working on during this legislative session is to close some of these exceptions and eliminate them and tighten rules so that we have more regulation for these commercial buildings. And then the other thing is that Connecticut follows the International Energy Conservation Code, which as of 2021, this is all new major retrofits of commercial buildings, are required to have those adaptive lighting technologies that we've been talking about, which are timers and motion sensors. So all new construction and major retrofits in our state of commercial buildings for exterior lighting systems should have different kinds of controls, turning off at different times of the day. It's usually within like an hour or two of closing, or by 11 p.m. Those are sort of the standard times. So we have that, but it's just, can we see the next slide? Yeah. The problem is that can you click one more time? The challenge is that we have, can you click one more time? There we go. Okay, so basically the challenge is that that only regulates new construction and major retrofits of commercial buildings. What about all the existing buildings? We have millions of existing buildings that aren't captured under that 2021 law or the 2004 law. And so we need to find ways to regulate existing buildings if we're really going to get the light pollution under control. And there's a couple different ways to do that. A term that you've been hearing quite a bit this evening is light trespass. And that is when a light cannot pass outside of a property border. So if I want to shine light, I can do it in my own property, but I can't shine light on someone else's property or outside. So a few towns here in Connecticut have a light trespass law. Canton, there's quite a handful of towns that have this light trespass. And that's actually really helps with annoyed neighbors. You know, we have Lights Out as a movement. We're really aiming for birds. That was kind of what our main target is, but we get a lot of people who come to our events because a neighbor is shining a light in there. Because it can be a stage show again. Who here has a neighbor who shines the light? What about people who leave their holiday lights on all night long? I have a neighbor where I actually can't sleep because on my left side of my bed, my neighbor's holiday lights are on all night long, and they're bright. I'm waiting for them to put them away. I don't know if they will. It's going to be like August. So a light trespass law, you know, would at least give you a basis for doing the light. The other idea might be to do a light curfew, which is similar to Lights Out, which is dim your lights at 11 p.m. All unnecessary lights. So you have to really make that distinction. What is necessary and what's not? And for not necessary lights, you know, landscape lighting, decorative lighting, to really turn those off or dim them significantly after 11 o'clock. So those are two ideas. And then the third one is to really know that we have a nuisance law, which is actually you are protected if you have a light nuisance at your own property. There is grounds in the state that you can complain about your neighbor doing light technically, but a lot of times go that extra distance. And I will say the state of Massachusetts did try to pass a state level light trespass law. It didn't go through last year, but I don't know if they'll try again this year. And then so the next slide. And then so this brings us to another way to regulate existing buildings. Last year, a large coalition of different organizations, Lights Out and Dark Sky, and different Audubons, came together and helped pass Connecticut Public Act number 23, so 2023, 143. It's Connecticut's Lights Out law. This requires all state-owned buildings to turn off non-essential outdoor lights from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. for birds. It's kind of a general law, you can see there. It doesn't exactly explain what is considered non-essential. That still maybe needs some tightening, you know, just as an explanation of what is non-essential. But we're one of the few states. Any guesses here of how many states in the country have a lights out rule for state-owned buildings? Any guesses? 5. We're maybe the second or third. Yeah, we're definitely the third, possibly the second. So not that many states have this, and we think that this is something that towns and cities could take on to say, towns and cities, your state buildings, when they're unoccupied, turn off the unnecessary lights at your city or town-owned buildings, which is a safe thing to do, and it's something that that we're doing at the state level, so we know it's safe. So cities and towns can follow and do it with their municipal buildings. And what's interesting is the law says, for the protection of birds. So it's an interesting purpose for this law, but the benefit is for everybody. I think maybe we have that next slide, which is that we celebrated because this law was voted unanimously out of the Senate, voted unanimously out of the Environment Committee, voted unanimously out of the House, signed into law by Governor Lamont in June and came into effect on January 1st. And this was a very popular law because it's estimated it will save the state of Connecticut $1.3 billion a year. And we had 35 co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle, lots of reps, few senators, but this was a very popular bill and it went unanimously through both chambers. So we were very happy with this one.
Partisanship should definitely be celebrated, right? Whenever we can get it. That's amazing. So this next question is for you, Leo. And the more that we talk, the more I realize that you're quite the trailblazer in the field, pun intended. So I think Meredith, you mentioned doing this work back in 2004, which, can you believe it, 2024 this year is 20 years later. Blows my mind. But what regulatory proposals are on the front burner for 2024, and how can members of the public help with this effort?
Next month, in February, the folks they comprise the Code Amendments Committee that deals with state building code proposed amendments. Starting next month, they accept proposed amendments. It lasts for the month of February. After that, they then assign a proposal number, and basically will then probably sometime in the summer hold hearings. Between the time that the proposal is submitted and the time that the hearings take place is a wonderful opportunity to submit support letters. Support letters are important to the Codes Amendments folks, so it's worth submitting them. We're going to be looking at one proposal will deal with the color temperature to set it at 3,000 Kelvin as a maximum. There are others that will deal with tightening up the existing regulation that requires fully shielded lighting in all commercial applications to not have quite as many exceptions. And just one example, right now, the regulation states that for all lighting that is powered from a building power source, they have to comply. Well, what that leaves out are all those floodlights that the utility company puts up on their wooden utility pole, not to light the right-of-way, but to light that private driveway for the commercial application where the owner of the property feels it's cheaper to pay them, so many dollars a month for the rental of that unit. Those are horrible in terms of light pollution. So we will propose that the building code be expanded to eliminate where the power source is, but instead address it from the point of view of where that light is intended to go. If it is within the right-of-way, for example, a street light, that's not us. That's not this regulation. But if that light is intended to illuminate that private property there, that commercial application, then yes, then it would apply. So anybody that's interested can get in touch with one of us, let us know, and then when we actually do submit, we'll include you in an email that basically gives you the proposal numbers and asks for your support in the way of sending in a support letter to the Codes Amendments Committee.
Thank you for that. Thank you for letting us know some different ways that we can help. Okay, so Craig, if a land trust property can be a sanctuary island of dark and a sea of light, is there anything else that they should worry about?
Yes, I kind of brushed on that answer when I previously spoke. Yeah, if you're surrounded, definitely advocate on your town level for some of these principles that we're talking about, just so you do not have this light spilling over into your land trust property. I understand you have one property, Carry Pasture, that has wetlands on it, that is actually, you're concerned about the encroachment of some sprawl coming up to it. This could be an issue for these creatures that are trying to live, mate, and be there. if there's going to be a lot of this light trespass. So definitely advocate on your town level. We will support you in this endeavor. On the Hampton Land Trust, we had somebody that sent us a letter saying that somebody broke into his house. He was positive that it came across our property, which has a kettle pond that has a celebrated mascot, the spotted salamander. And he said, I am going to get these floodlights and blasted in so we can see anybody who's coming. I'm going to encourage all of my neighbors to do the same, and I'll pay for their lights. Our response was, it's against the law. Please don't do that, or we'll take proper action. So you've got to get the law on your side. You've got to get these ordinances done.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Meredith, there are so many homes and businesses in our state, right? In the absence of uniform rules requiring residential homes to dim their lights, i.e. your Christmas light neighbor, how do we convince enough people to turn off their lights voluntarily at the same time to make a difference for birds? It's interesting that this is a question too, because I've noticed in recent years, especially since during COVID, it seems like turning on lights has been kind of like a show of solidarity within communities. So, just is it possible? Have any other cities or states managed to do that yet? Are there other things we can do to show solidarity? That's a different question.
Yeah, so the Lights Out effort started in the 1990s in Toronto, where they had an idea. This was before any laws had ever been passed to protect birds in the built environment, that they were going to create a voluntary program to get everybody to turn off their lights, and in particular buildings that were very, very lit up. And so they started Lights Out, and it kind of like picked up, and now there are Lights Out programs all over the country. And Audubon has their Lights Out. The thing is that you can have both an individual effect, especially at certain commercial buildings. Unfortunately, did anybody hear about that mass collision that happened at McCormick Place in October that Craig talked about? We saw the birds that died there, but McCormick Place is actually the largest conference center in the United States. It's all glass and right on Lake Michigan. If you've ever been to Chicago, you know the Magnificent Mile, that beautiful area. It's an all glass building right on the lake. And so as the birds were flying south, because it's fall, they were coming in the early morning, and the lit up building and the glassiness, and they all crashed. There was a study done at that very building that came out in 2021 that showed that when lights from the interior of the building, I'm talking about interior lights, when 50% of the lights are turned off, it's going to show us a slide. This is how glassy it is. When 50% of the lights at McCormick Place were turned off, 60% of the mortalities were reduced. So that means that one building can have an effect like that, really strategic. And the sad, but the news is that McCormick Place has since committed that they will always turn off lights every night, ever since this mass collision event, and that they're also going to find ways to mitigate the collapse. And that's a whole other topic, but they finally, that horrible event convinced them to do the right thing. But that shows that one building can make a difference by turning off its light, but cumulatively, you need a lot of people to all turn off their lights at the same time. And there are places that are doing that. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, they're very dedicated with their lighting. St. Augustine, Florida, extremely concerned about the sea turtles, and they have very strict lighting rules. There are towns and cities around the country that are banding together, but it takes a community to make a decision that they value the night sky, that they see the ecosystem benefits. So it really takes a lot of concerted organizing. But there are places that have managed to do it.
You definitely don't want to be the neighbor that keeps their light on in St. Augustine, Florida, right? Thank you so much. So Craig, what are some activities that a land trust can do to educate people about the night sky and its importance to humans and wildlife, including this event tonight, right?
I think a great way to teach people about nature and face it, our dark habitat is a part of nature, is to put people in touch with it. We've got some wonderful properties. In the summertime, or maybe in the spring or fall, you know, when the sun's not setting like at 9 o'clock at night, but is to go out and just spread out blankets, of course, watch for ticks, we are in Connecticut, spread out blankets and just watch the night come on. And you know, watch the fireflies come out. What's the first stars that you see in the evening? Are you seeing a star or is it actually a planet? And just watch it slowly come on. You'll, especially if it's going to be in August, you have such an event, you could hear the cicadas, you could hear the katydids, you could hear the crickets starting to come out. Put people in touch with nature. There's a very good book by John Himmelman called Cricket Radio. He also has a guidebook on these singing insects at night. And so that could be a great activity. I know oftentimes on our land trust we will go out and point out a lot of plants and pollinators and things like that. Sometimes it's birds, but why not have something about the insects? Or just have a night where you have a great strawberry harvest coming in and go out and watch fireflies and have strawberry shortcake or something. Just put people in touch with nature. There's a lot of nature at night. This time of year, this is when the great horned owl starts to meet. So they're becoming very active. In February, that's a famous time for the barred owl to start meeting. So it can be quite noisy out there.
Yeah, the owl prowl just sold out. The Bend to the River is having an owl prowl and it's sold out. Everyone wants to go see owls at night.
And when was that? Is that scheduled for?
25th.
Wow. Yeah. FOMO, fear of missing out. Apparently that's the place to be, huh? Okay, Leo. On average, about 1% of outdoor lighting actually illuminates the intended target for illumination, and 99% of the light goes elsewhere. The energy used for outdoor lighting in the U.S. each year is enough to power 35 million homes. If we could eliminate wasted energy from outdoor lighting, 34 million homes could be powered. What can we do to reduce energy waste from outdoor lighting?
One of the things that I've always been interested in is street lighting. In Connecticut, would you be surprised if I told you that at least 80% of the street lights that are on the wooden utility poles have absolutely no value in terms of collision avoidance or other safety? None. As a matter of fact, in my time at the Roadway Lighting Committee, we entertained this issue where the Roadway Lighting Committee says that for safety, you should have what they call a min to max ratio. And what they mean by that is this, that if the light directly under the street light, when measured at the street level, let's just say is 10-foot candle, then in between the two lights should be no less than 2-foot candle. So you don't end up with light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, okay? Well, in order to really have proper lighting, you have to have proper pole spacing. And when you have an interstate highway where the poles are dedicated to the lights, you will have proper spacing. But when you have lights that are attached to the wooden utility pole, that wooden utility pole is spaced based on wire weight distribution factors. It has nothing to do with lighting. They don't know if the light's going to go up there or not. So everything is spaced based on that wire weight distribution, and it is spaced much, much further apart than it should be for light distribution factors. So the question is this: if we could prove that yes, at an intersection, at a crosswalk, at that downtown business district, at the fire department entrance, and several other roadway or railway crossing, if all of those factors were said, okay, yes, you can put a street light there, how many street lights would it be that we end up saying, hey, there's really no reason for this one? But yet at the same time, there's an aversion to taking the streetlights down. Some people want the streetlight there because it lights their yard and they feel good about that. But from a tax dollar standpoint, if you're going to put a streetlight in someone's yard because it lights their yard, you really should do that for everyone. The same way that you pick up the trash for everyone. You shouldn't be able to have this taxpayer get the light and not that one or that one, okay? So there's something that a town can do that is a tremendous step forward, and that is to create a streetlight master plan. And we have a template that the town could start with in terms of, saying this is a starting point, and maybe we'll do part of it and do some of our own. But that streetlight master plan basically says, here are all the reasons why a streetlight is warranted. And what you do is you basically come to the point where you now have a consensus on what those warranting points are. You have an audit committee, and they go out, and they audit every single streetlight in town. And they either check a box to show that it is warranted, or they don't check the box because it's not warranted. And when it's all said and done, they then come back and do a serious discussion about taking down those streetlights that don't serve a public safety purpose. So that's one way that a substantial amount of energy waste and light pollution could be reduced if we actually took the time to decide where we need a street light, why we need a street light, and for all the lights we have in town, which ones qualify to keep and which ones really should be taken down and removed.
Okay. So Meredith, you're going to close out our curated question section and we'll open it up. So Meredith, you have said that any realistic approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption in our state needs to include a strategy, to minimize unnecessary nighttime lighting, both exterior and interior. How does addressing our growing light pollution crisis relate to global warming and climate change?
Yeah, that's the really cool thing I think about lights out. There's a lot of reasons why I'm really passionate about this topic, but one of them is that this issue of light pollution, it affects, or it is affected by the two major environmental crises of our time. First, the climate change, and second of all, biodiversity loss. The sixth mass extinction, if you've heard of it phrased that way. And the thing is that all of that unnecessary lighting that Leo just talked about, the amount of wasted light, if you take that amount of electricity and you plug it in, the corresponding amount of carbon emissions is massive. We did a calculation, we were working with some folks in Bridgeport on a park that was very overlit, all night long, over 100 lights, and they found that they could save, first of all, fiscally, like $9,000 if they put them on timers instead of 11 p.m. But then the corresponding amount of millions of tons of carbon that would be prevented from, this is the park. This is actually a park in Bridgeport. They spent over $500,000 installing 113 lights that are on all night long. So, but if you do the math of how much money does it cost them to run those all night, it's about $10,000 a year unnecessarily for all night long. But then if you do the carbon math, this is just one small part, but if you expand that out, we know that lighting is, for commercial buildings, the second largest electricity factor after heating and cooling. So like in this building that we're in right now, lighting is the second largest energy expenditure typically. And so if you can reduce your energy waste, of course, you reduce your carbon footprint. It's very simple. And so if we care as a state and as a town about lowering carbon footprint, hitting net zero goals, part of that has to be to reduce the waste and to reduce the energy usage. And an easy way to do that is with light you don't need. At least for me, that's a total no-brainer.
Thank you, Meredith. Okay, Patty, so We have heard about skyscrapers or convention centers in Chicago. We've seen pictures of Times Square. We know that the whole eastern seaboard is an absolute disaster for lights and for migrating birds. But we're here in Farmington, right? What can we do in Farmington? What can we do to encourage the town to look at this in more detail? I know you talked to us about every 2 years. The agenda is set forth. What can we do in the meantime? What can we do to prepare for the next time? Help us out.
So I'll tell you, the town council meetings, green effort meetings, every public town meeting is attended by the members of those committees and very few members of the public, which means that the people who are making decisions about which way the town should go are the people that you've elected into office or the people that have been appointed, which is great, but they're making their own decisions. So sending an email, showing up and making some comments about what you're interested in. I know that Green Efforts has at least one, if not 2, open positions right now. You can go to the town website and you can apply to be on any of the town's committees. But Green Efforts is the one that makes a difference here in terms of the lighting. We've already had these conversations, but talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, not everyone is aware of what the impacts are, and a mass movement is or mass communication is what moves the elected officials to make change. What I regularly hear is, nobody wants that, why would we do that? So I think it's important that residents tell their elected officials, tell the people sitting on committees what you're interested in, what you think is important. And then don't forget about the private businesses and places like Tungus Mead that I can see anywhere in town on any given night. I can see the lights. I can see one of the exceptions to this state law, which I don't know how to manage, maybe someone else does, is sports facilities. I can see the high school lights every time there's a football game. I can see them, and I live 2 miles away and hear them. So I think it's a matter of getting your voice heard to make change and making the small steps yourself and telling people why you're making those changes. Oh, one other thing, you can actually make proposals to town planning and zoning to change the zoning ordinances. There are processes in place for that. The zoning ordinances are forward-looking, so they pertain to new constructions, new developments. The town ordinances would apply across the town. So a change to the town ordinance, say a light trespass law, would apply to everyone regardless of whether it's a building that's currently there or it's being built in the future. So that's the difference between the zoning and the town council ordinances.
Wonderful, thank you. Getting educated on so many different things tonight. So are we opening it up for questions? Should I have the roving microphone if anybody has any questions, comments?
Thanks, Jess. Meredith, you touched a little on interior lights in Chicago, but the state law has to do with the state buildings outside lights. Can you just speak on why that isn't covered? You know, the facade inside lights of the buildings, which affect bird migration and everything too. Is that just that we didn't get enough strength in that law? Can you maybe speak on that issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually in the state building code, the exterior lighting, it's regulated separately from interior. In the energy code that we saw, exterior lighting, interior lighting, usually treated in separate sections. Originally, that law was going to require all state-owned buildings and all state-leased buildings. Now, when they were trying to capture both of those categories of buildings, they had projected savings of $3 million. It's like $3.9 million we're going to save if they could do not just state-owned, but also state-leased buildings. And also, I'm pretty sure did they have interior at any point on that law? It was always exterior, okay, yeah. Then I can't say why they didn't go for it. They might have just thought it was too challenging. It might have been. And it's really up to the discretion of each agency. So like if it's at a courthouse or a DMV, they can make their own choices about what's non-essential and what's not, what they want to leave on, what they don't. But I think it was just because it's pretty ambitious law, I think, because it didn't pass in 2022. We got it unanimously passed in 2023. It didn't even get out of committee in 2022. And I think, you know, it got a little bit weakened along the way when they took off the state least. But really, those things are really treated a little bit separately, a little bit with interior and exterior lighting. But we talked a lot about exterior lighting tonight, but there are a lot of rules on interior lights as well, and those definitely impact others. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Hello. I just want to say thank you again for your insight tonight. It's been very educational. Yeah, I kind of a specific question. I'm seeing all the highway lights and the street lights turning to that purple lighting. I don't know if people have seen that. Yeah, I mean, it's really distracting to me. I don't know about other people, but I don't know if does that make a greater or lesser impact on you're talking about
The purple lighting is a malfunction. It's a lighting system that's not working right. It needs to be replaced. It's never been designed like that, but it's the result of the problem, an electrical problem or whatever, that causes that light to come out purple. It needs to be taken down and replaced.
I thought it was something that they were starting to change.
It's a whole stretch of highway that is.
Yeah. So I didn't know if it was more impactful or less for some stuff like that.
I'd like to add one other comment to what Patty was talking about in terms of how you communicate with your elected officials. I attended a conference at the Connecticut State House a number of years ago. It was hosted by some pretty powerful legislators who were there to talk about how to be most effective. And this applies at any level. The most effective is an in-person visit. That carries a lot of weight. After that, it's a handwritten note, a handwritten letter, carries weight. After that, something that's typewritten and they're not sure whether you just photocopied it or what did you do. And the last on the list is a phone call, where you call up and say, hey, you know, I don't like this or whatever. But keep that in mind if you have the time and can make that appointment to see someone face to face. That's going to carry a lot more weight with that person you saw than any type of letter or any type of phone call will.
Thank you.
I think Craig has a
I'd like to pile on what Neil said.
Take bids and
The representative from Essex, Connecticut, I have heard her say this a couple of times, that you could get some emails that are put out by these large conservation organizations in the state with a form letter. That's really don't pay attention to that, but if you handwrite it or talk to them, make it personal, let them know I'm in your district, this is what's happening, please do something. That carries a lot of weight. You know, they hear from these professional lobbyists who are employed by these conservation organizations all the time. So what really carries weight is when an individual citizen from their district reaches out to them.
Yeah, and they say they only need about nine emails for them to really take notice of something. It's not like you need to have 100. If 9 people in a span of like a day or two send a message on one topic, they'll notice it and people care. So it doesn't take a huge amount.
even better if 9 people go and make an appointment.
Thank you again. My question is, if you have some recommended talking points, sort of a script to share with your neighbors, businesses, plazas, some people in our community who don't know, and you don't want to come across angry as an angry birder.
I love it, angry birder. So it looks like this is a hot topic, so we'll go just around.
One angry birder to another. Please go to our website. We have some of our brochures in the back that has our website on it. This would be the Lights Out Connecticut one. Or just go to our website, lightsoutconnecticut.org, and there is a plethora of materials and talking points. Also, if you'd like to get on, thanks Sally, if you'd like to get on our mailing list, take this pledge. I will enter your name and address and all that, so you are on our mailing list whenever there's big announcements coming. But there's a lot of material that we put on there. Form letters, ideas, talking points like you asked. Also some bibliographies if you want to like really get into the literature and geek out with some friends.
One of the things that you can do is obviously talk to the owner. You've got a business, let's say, that is causing a problem with the way that they do their lighting. Well, the state building code only applies to new properties or renovated properties. Now, in 2004, when the state building code light pollution control amendment went into effect, LED lightings were not around. They weren't out on the commercial market yet. So when you go around and you see an LED light that's basically non-compliant, that's a problem, because that person, when they did that renovation, should have done it in compliance with the state building code requirements. So with that in mind, you know, you can be very nice about it, but the bottom line is, what can you do, you know, to make this good? In Suffield, where I'm from, we had a funeral home that was horribly lit. And we had a couple of meetings, and in the second meeting, we said, you know, what we'd like to do is write an article in the Suffield Observer of a before and after, right, to show, you know, what you've done to help the community. That person lit up, the owner of the funeral home lit up. It was all then from that point on, just a matter of a few months before all the lights were done right. And yes, we did write an article, right, commending them with the before and after. So there are ways to talk with people. You know, the biggest problem is the fact that a lot of people don't like the idea of being told what to do, okay? So it's a matter of approach. That whole idea of saying we're going to write an article, you know, that praises you, that you know, hey, my business, you're going to do that? Okay, what do I need to do, right? So, okay. But communicating directly with those business owners, knowing that you're not going to hit a home run every time. But if you go and you go up to bat 10 times, you might get 3 of them that will actually say, okay, you know, we'll do it, we'll make it right. So that's just a thought.
That was actually a really great last question, give some action items, right, of what we can do. Kate, did you want
The other thing that we can do is share an email with all of you with all of the different websites and ways and bibliographies, et cetera. So if you share it with me, I can get it out to everyone who signed up to come tonight, because we have your email addresses. So. Right, and go out to the entire, yeah, absolutely, and on our website as well. So. Well, any other questions? Are we wrapping it up? Going to turn off the lights? Well, I want to thank the panel for coming out tonight and sharing all of their knowledge. Well, yes, I will. And I
This is so much fun.
definitely want to thank Jess. She is an amazing moderator. You really brought it together and made it sing, so thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all of you for coming, for having an interest, and share all of the information with those that you know and love, and some, and even if you don't love them. There's still a lot of information on the table back there. Please pick up,